Good evening. The meeting will come to order. We have a quorum. Note Councilman Witten absent.
I don't hear any audio.
Note for everyone to silence your phones, please. And at this time, I ask Councilman Blocker to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Opens policy making and legislative session. Do we have? We don't have anything.
I'll just approve the agenda and add those items to it.
Okay. We have an item to add to the agenda, item D on schedule of meetings. Most important item D1, April 30th special meeting concerning charter elements. And 2, rescheduling of a May 29th meeting, and we can discuss that date and time for reschedule. So do we have a motion to approve
Just
the amended agenda?
Just do a consensus, we don't have a
Oh.
vote, so, at this
Yeah,
meeting.
excuse me. Do we have consensus?
Yes, it's consensus from me.
General consensus to approve agenda. At this time, public opportunity on council propositions. Anyone from the audience wishing to speak? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to item 6, workshop items. First, discussion of changes to council rules and regulations.
Basically, Mr. Whitten asked that these be brought forth. This will be brought forth on a resolution at the regular meeting on May the 14th. Based on, right now, when someone brings up an item for discussion during the public opportunity, they're not required to bring any documentation at all, or if they do, they're not required to bring it till that night. Mr. Whitten has asked that if anyone wishes to address the council, that they bring that documentation at the same time the documentation is due from the regular members of the staff, and that it be presented as a part, that it has to be in our office by 5 o'clock of the Wednesday 12 days prior to the presentation, which is the time that the staff has to have that in now. That way you guys have time to look at it. Any presentation, this is not the public opportunity, this is an actual presentation. So you guys have time to look at it prior to the meeting instead of it just being handed to you that night. So that resolution, there's no action on it tonight unless you want to make any changes. The resolution itself will be on the May 14th agenda.
Any discussion on this item, resolution 18-13 proposed?
Mr. President, I don't see any provisions of what might be the policy if there was something developed that was unknown in the time requested prior to that meeting. How you gonna handle that?
Mr. President, if you look at the bottom portion of that, they say exceptions to this timeline will be addressed on an individual basis, so we do have latitude with that being in there, in case something pops up and the council president or whoever decides that it's worthy of being presented at a later date instead of that 12 days out. Am I reading that correct, Ms. Roy?
Yes, sir. Any exception, but this is strictly based on the presentations, the scheduled presentations from the public, not from anything from a department head or a council
Right.
member or anything else.
Public only.
We still also have our standard yellow card procedure,
Yes.
short notice.
This is on, when they want to address something that's an actual presentation, this isn't public opportunity, this is a scheduled presentation.
Just give y'all an opportunity
Yeah.
to read their,
Study it.
what they're saying.
Very much needed.
I agree with, Mr. President, I agree. Sometimes we get hit with things that we don't have any knowledge of or have not time to study, and this will give ample time to research or consult with department heads or whoever we might think is necessary to get the information so we can make a wise judgment if we have to.
At this time, they already have to let us know 12 days in advance they're going to be on there, but they don't have to give any documentation. This just adds that factor into it, that any documentation they're going to present also has to be here.
I don't have any objections.
Okay, we have general consensus to move forward on this item. Next item, B, discussion of Crestview Property Maintenance Code, growth management.
Good evening, gentlemen. We had brought this up in March, and we had set a deadline for any reviews, comments, or anything else to be addressed in the property maintenance code to be addressed by a deadline of April 9th. We had only one comment and concern there, and we met with the fire department and went through and have addressed all their comments and questions and suggestions and help. We did notice one this morning. It's on page 2 of the code, and it's 102.710, provisions in reference codes and standards. We're going to go ahead and strike that entire paragraph, as the intent of it is handled in other places, and we don't want to confuse this code with trying to take any authority over the Florida Building Code or the Florida Fire Prevention Code, as the code official will actually be working under all 3 of the codes. So, having said that,
That's 102.7.1.
that small paragraph right there. And there was no other questions, comments, or recommendations or suggestions. So we're here to ask the board to, or the council to, for consensus to move to ordinance format for the May 14th meeting with its adoption hearing on June 11th.
Okay, I open the floor to council members, starting on right, Councilman Fairclough.
As I reviewed this, I only found one thing, but all it is sentence structure. It doesn't have to do with the ordinance itself. So.
Well, if it's worth getting it right, let's.
Well, on page 4, section 106.3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down, it says if the notice of violation is not complied with. Seemed like it would sound better if non-compliance with this violation, or upon non-compliance with this violation, the code official shall institute.
you repeat that section again, please?
It's page 4, section 106.3.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 line down.
Okay, we will review that and see if we can restructure the sentence where it would be more advantageous.
Well, it's just, I was taught not to put a preposition there, so,
Yep.
but that's all I found. I reviewed that whole thing today.
Okay, Councilman Hayes.
Only thing, Mr. President and council members, I reviewed this several times, and I think it's covers what the city's looking for as the maintenance and the upkeep of structures and automobiles in the yard and falling down structures. So I'm glad to see that we finally have this where I think it needs to be. That's my only comment.
Thank you. Councilman Blocker.
Well, I had also a question, same one that Mr. Fairclough had on that thing, but now, it may be in another paragraph. I have read most of these things twice already, but the verbiage of where the time frame after a violation certificate has been issued, time frame to act or not act. I don't find that listed per se. Am I overlooking it?
Can you give us a section to
Got a
reference?
section, we've spent many hours perusing and reformatting the whole thing, so I'm not sure exactly where your question's there. All notices have a predetermined time frame of enactment, your first notice, your second notice. Any type of procedure has a predetermined number of days that is given to the applicant to respond.
Well,
So-
I just thought it might be a good idea if that was all verbiage in the same paragraph here.
So you want the time frame actually listed under the
I think that'd
violations?
be a good idea personally now. I'm speaking personal.
Well, in your notice and orders, you've got where we go back to the parts of our chapter and parts of the state statute where they are actually listed. The thing about putting definite timeframes in our code, if some of those rules and regulations change at the state level, which grants X number more days or something like that, we'd have to go back and modify our code. Is that going to be acceptable?
I'm aware of that. But people will not research this whole 100 pages. to
That's
find out
why,
what they're
that's why
regulated
it's,
by.
that's why it's stated in, if you received a notice or a citation, there is a definite response date, a definite response time, all listed in that notice given to the applicant. It's listed on your citation. It's, chances are they're never going to look at the code itself.
No.
So that's why if you give it into the communication that you hand out to a person that has a violation, that's when we stress the timeframes and the procedures and how to, the solution to the problem.
Sometimes it takes a different period of time depending on what the
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm getting at.
offense is. Well, she said, each one of them has got it in there. Well, she says what the time was on each violation.
That's all I
Is
have
that-
this time, Mr. President.
Okay. I'm good with this document. I know there's been much time and effort put in this and refining this and getting to this stage. So I'm good with it. And so we have general consensus to approve. Okay.
I like it.
So we will bring it back in ordinance format on May 14th for its first reading. Thank you.
Okay, next item is item 6C, discussion of flood damage prevention ordinance.
Gentlemen, this looks like a whole long involved series, but it's actually just nice, short, sweet, and simple. Article 20 is your flood damage prevention. In its entirety, which the majority of this was actually part of Ordinance 898, which come to be in 1996. There's been a couple of Band-Aids put on it in 99 and 2003. We've worked with the state now for several years in anticipation for our new flood zone maps that are about to be released. And so you know, in case you haven't reviewed any of the flood maps, there are very few areas within the city that are affected by a negative flood zone. Most of our property is in flood zone X. There are some properties that are inundated with some wetlands and some of your flood zones that would specify the need for flood zone insurance. So what we have done is we have worked diligently with the state to put in proper verbalization that will take us through all the state laws, and it's more or less updating our old to our new. So it reflects the new laws, it reflects the new codes. It leaves the powers and the duty with a floodplain administrator. Gentlemen, your old had a floodplain administrator. That is your administrative assistant to the council. So it mandates that the growth management director therefore would be directed as the floodplain administrator. The state requires many requirements and inspections and site work and development and concentration on different calculations and all for the flood zone area. Luckily, we have very little. But all in all, it's simply modernizing the verbiage of our old ordinance. And the easiest way to do that is to delete the old ordinance and adopt in our new verbiage in a format that is approved by the state, approved by FEMA, and the other entities that we must address in the environmental area. Now, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. As I said, there's very few areas that is inundated with the land. We could not pass it before because we had to pass the recreational vehicle ordinance, because there's a section that deals with recreational vehicles, and the city had to establish where it stood on recreational vehicles in order for it to be incorporated into the ordinance. It has been done now. We are in this also. There is a couple of what we call local administrative changes to the Florida Building Code in respect to flood zone areas and their elevations. And in the the area of the flooding in the Florida Building Code existing building, there's also two administrative areas that will actually have some language incorporated into it. These are all on the suggestion and recommendation of the state researchers, and that's kind of where we're at.
Mr. President,
Mr. Block.
in drafting all this data of this flood damage prevention, who was the party that did that? Was that city attorneys? Or my question, bottom line is, or was there at any moment, any time in reviewing and drafting this document, working in conjunction with what the county has on the flood damage prevention? Point in case, because I know that we still got a pending case that happened about 6-7 years ago.
Now, this is actually, we worked diligently with the representatives from the state so that this, and their attorneys, it has been fully vetted every step of the way. As a matter of fact, this ordinance is 5 years in the making. There has been numerous of correspondences with the board that was, the state had hired and tasked with fulfilling the flood damage prevention in order to get it to this point. So to put it, there's been consultants, there's been attorneys, there's been city people, there's been state people. It's the same thing that will be presented to Okaloosa County. They're working with the same type procedure in order to get theirs modernized. This is has been a joint effort among many, many people. And that's about what I can say for it, you know. It's not something that a local person put together.
Good, okay. That's all at this moment.
Councilman Fairclough.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Is a floodplain and a flood zone, is that the same thing?
The floodplain is the technical term for all flood zones.
Okay.
Now, a flood zone, you can be in a flood zone. Everybody's in a flood zone. You might as well, everybody is in a flood zone. The majority of uplands is in what they call Zone X. It is an area that's determined to be outside the 500-year floodplain. So, if you go down to an A, you may be an elevation determined elevation A. It just, there's numerous of different avenues that they use to get the criteria for whether or not you can construct something in that floodplain. If a house on stilts will equate being out of the floodplain, you may, there's some where you can't build at all.
Do you have any information as whether or not the county has or the state has a prohibition about building in the floodplain or flood zone?
If you will, within this, there are very specific criteria for any type of construction in the floodplain. That's what I'm saying. There are avenues where you can construct certain items within certain levels of the floodplain. It's more or less discouraged to anything that is ample to have severe flooding. You're, of course, not encouraged to develop there. But if you'll go through where there's actually the, where you can get the permitting in order for buildings that or structures or facilities that can actually be exempt from the floodplain, and also where you can get a general permit in order to propose a certain type of construction there. You can have site plans and construction documents. It's very entailed, and if everything swims around the firm maps, your flood insurance rate maps, and their study, which sort of dictate where those flood levels are. Well, now those are just where it's shown upon a map. Perhaps you have a lot that you want to construct on, and the tail end of it appears to be in the floodplain. You've been out on the property, there's no water, there's no evidence that it's ever flooded. You can have a surveyor do a topographic study of that property and the surrounding areas to determine the elevation and whether it's a viable concern to have flood insurance, to go through the flood development in a floodplain, Or you may actually be exempted out and, according to your elevation certificate, may be deemed as not being in the floodplain. So there's procedures to all types of locations and different restrictions that are on it, and different, let's put it, different hoops you have to jump through. But it all evolves around the elevation of your land and the elevation of your nearest water.
Well, the county must have different rules and regs about it. I'm familiar with a piece of property that is on a pretty good slope, 20 acres of it, and it all slopes down to a creek.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the creek flooded during our 100-year flood here 3 so years ago. But it only went up that hill maybe 20, 30 yards, which even didn't get to the midpoint of the property. And we were advised that we could not, the whole thing was in the floodplain, we couldn't build anything on it.
Did you challenge it with a topographic
No.
study of your own?
No, we didn't know to do that.
That's how you counter it. Because these maps are constructed from air, they don't go out and survey the land. Your firm rate maps are come from interpolations, from LIDAR, from different avenues. The way to challenge where you concede that the property hasn't flooded, doesn't flood, should not be saddled with a different flood zone other than X, which is the outside the 500-year flood. That's how you challenge it. You have a topographic study of the land by a surveyor who would mark it out, because that's what the maps is themselves. Your zones, actually, like when you're developing in an A, you can be in an area where you have a certain elevation along a waterway, a certain elevation of that waterway that would dictate where the flood zone was drawn at. And you may be well above that particular elevation. So that's the way you challenge your flood zone, is through topographic study prepared by a surveyor and an engineer who will track out where that water level is.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Hayes, do you?
Yeah, I just, Mr. Fairclough just made me start thinking a little bit. Concerning the permitting of the property, does that come through ours? Is that a state operation?
For the
Yeah,
for the
you
flood
just-
zone permit,
Uh-huh.
it would start with us, and then it would go in through the other permits that would be required is your Northwest Water Management District, your Florida Department of Health, your Florida Department of Environmental Protection, and sometimes your Florida Department of Environmental Protection will also be in conjunction with your U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which when they fall under the Clean Water Act.
So it's not just ours, it's a host of other agencies that have to sign off on it.
As we do with any development. If you were going to develop uplands, you come and you get our approvals and our permits, well, 9 times out of 10, you've got to have your Northwest Florida Water Management, you got to have your DEP, you got to have scads of regulatory permits in order to assume that it's safe, viable, permittable by state, city, county, everybody's.
Okay.
But it's just part of it.
That's all for me, Mr. President.
Okay. Myself, I spent a considerable amount of time on this Saturday, going through this, a lot of material in here, very detailed, but I didn't find anything that I would object to in this. Mr. Holly, do you have any comments on it? Okay, do we have a general consensus?
Well, I got a question there.
You recognize?
Tricia, you might can give me just allude to a possible risk on page 9, it's in paragraph C of the permit holder's risk of what might be encountered by the things that could or could not be listed anywhere. Could you allude to any type of the risk they might be encountered with?
Risk, and I don't understand, where are you at? On page
Page
9?
9, paragraph C.
So, see, right there.
102-422, Division 2, paragraph C.
102403 is on page 9. 103,
No, at the very top, Teresa.
Very top
at
of
the
it.
top.
Green page 9.
I have green page 9 in my hand, and the only item C I see is 102403, item C.
Well, I have two Cs on my page 9.
422
Yeah,
C.
1C.
It feeds off 102-422.
That the permit holder's risk. What could be any of those risks you might allude to?
Oh, this green is what we have now.
That's current.
That's what we
Right.
have, this is what we have currently now.
But this all may totally go away.
That is going away, all of it.
All of it.
Because it's, the verbiage is inadequate for today's standards.
Yes. But all of this, what I will say now, where this has been incorporated into our revised.
Okay, everything in the green sheet is going to be completely removed.
True.
Everything in the proposed will take its place. It was too laborsome to try to revise the existing. It simply needed a complete rewrite.
All I have, Mr. President.
Thank you. Do we, I believe we have a general consensus to move this forward? We do.
Okay, thank you. Can we move?
Yes, at this time, we can discuss newly added item D on scheduling of meetings, first April 30th.
Okay.
meeting.
Okay. Gentlemen, we actually had it tailed on this particular workshop in order to discuss the final items in getting our charter ordinance, the ordinance itself passed with the ballot questions, and so that we can get it to the supervisor of elections by June 15th. Our attorney from Tallahassee, Scott Shirley, has been working with me. He couldn't be here. He can be here April the 30th in order to help answer any questions that we might have. We would like to bring the ordinance to you on May 14th for the second reading on June 11th, so that we can transfer it on to the supervisor of election prior to that June 15th deadline. He has offered to come and be at a special meeting on the 30th, if it is so desired by the council. I was instructed to call and to bring this forward by Councilman Whitten, so he is aware of this and he supports it. So
What time?
that would be up to your discretion. If you want it at 5:30 or you want it at 6 o'clock.
Be better at 5:30.
Is this the only item on the agenda?
That's the only item we're having the meeting for.
5:30 works for me.
Works for
Okay,
me.
Councilman Hayes. Clock. I'm good, although I can't, I won't be present at that. So,
You can-
yes.
You
we're-
can listen to us on our excellent media.
So we're good with April 30th, 5:30, special meeting on the charter elements.
Exactly. The second was Memorial Day. It's the 28th of May. I know there's a desire just to actually cancel that complete workshop. We have numerous items out there running around. It might be advantageous to reschedule it to Tuesday, the 29th. So it's,
Mr. President.
Mr. Davis.
Thank you. Since Ms. Teresa said that we got some things that's running around out there, you know, we don't want to keep kicking things down the can, kicking things down the can, kicking things down the road. So if we got some things that's we think is important, that we let the president look at the things that's on there and see if they're worth having at that time. And then they can let us know what she says. We got things that we need to address, so I'm for having a meeting, you know. I plan on being in this area anyway, so one day won't matter to me.
you don't, if you don't want to make the decision now, we will bring it up in the May meeting. This will just get you thinking about it. You still have the May 14th meeting that you can make your final decision. I will assemble you a list so that maybe you can each peruse through it and see, you know, evaluate whether it'll be a good use of your time.
That'd be good.
Is that good?
That sounds good
Okay.
to me.
Is the May 29th, that's on Tuesday, right?
Right, it's a Tuesday because Monday is the holiday.
Okay.
Our meeting can't be held on, well, I guess it could, but you would have no attendance.
Okay.
I will, as I was said to Mr. Hayes, I will pull together a list of items and y'all can evaluate it and make your final decision in the May 14th meeting.
Excuse me. Unless we change it, you do have it scheduled for May 29th,
I just brought it forward for the
And-
29th. No,
Oh.
we don't have it for the 29th. It's,
that
you'll,
clears it up.
You
you'll,
said it on the meeting in May, is what she said.
yeah, the,
So-
you, come May 14th, you're either gonna have to cancel that, you're gonna have to cancel the May 28th meeting anyway to be proper, isn't that right, Ms. Roy? So you're gonna have to cancel it, so whether or not you want to reschedule it or cancel it outright is what you need to be thinking about.
But is anyone, council member, not available for Tuesday, the 29th? Do we have a general consensus then to have it on May 29th? There's 4 of us.
What time? Suppose.
This is a workshop, they begin at 5:30.
5:30.
Okay.
It's okay with me.
You have general consensus.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, item 7, comments from the audience. Anyone from the audience wishing to speak? Hearing none? Excuse me. Thank you. Okay.
I know Mr. Mayor has some announcements.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I just remind everyone that the ceremony honoring Mia Manganello will be tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. at Warriors Hall. The county commission is participating, as well as Walker Elementary School. It's not going to be a long ceremony, maybe 30 minutes, but anyone would love to have you come out for that. And the National Day of Prayer, with the situation we have with the traffic seminar at Warriors Hall on May, I guess that's Thursday, May 3rd. It's also the day for the National Day of Prayer that they've normally done here at City Hall. They always like to have city officials available, and I don't think any of them will be in City Hall that day. So they're going to do their National Day of Prayer at about 12:30 on the steps of Warriors Hall. We should probably be on a break at that time, and if not, it won't be disruption to what's going on inside. So those of us who want to step out there.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me check with department heads. Chuck Powell, anything? Marie? Tony? Teresa, you good?
I will say, if anything needs praying over, it's the transportation symposium, so. The couple things, again, Mr. Witten will be there at the meeting tomorrow. If he is better to make a presentation, we have Joey the jeweler made us a silver coin to present on behalf of the city, and actually when I went to go pay for it today, he gave it to us, so it was his contribution to the celebration, so I want to thank Joey for that. Mr. Witten was going to a Laurel Hill workshop tomorrow to brief them on transportation, but I don't know that he's going to be able to be there if anybody wants to take his place. And also, he's having his first meeting on the charter referendum, if he's better, Thursday at 9 o'clock at Casbah Coffee, so that's my stuff.
All right. Everybody through?
Just a brief thing, and I'm sure everybody's aware of it. The ethnic training was in Fort Walton. We had, 5 of our people there, more than anybody else. For the next one, it's going to be in Panama City. So that's the next closest one for the ones who might not have had it that might need it. So keep that date on there. It's one in the Punic and Fort Walton's gone. So your next closest drive is Panama City. That's all, Mr. President.
Okay. I have one item before we adjourn. Just want to make everyone aware that we currently on the Okaloosa Walton Transportation Planning Organization, there are 3 CAC, Citizen Advisory Committee member seats available for the city of Crestview. It's the first time I can remember that we don't have any representation on that.
And it's not from reaching out. We have reached out to most of the citizens that we had thought of, so if the board could round us up some, that would be appreciative. We have a couple that have had their work conflict. They would love to participate, but their work won't allow them. So.
Okay. If we can word out citizens out there that want to make a difference, it's without remuneration, but the Transportation Board takes advice of the Citizen Advisory Committee. They are important. And we need to get those slots filled. So if there's citizens out there that will step up and do something positive, that's all I have. This meeting is adjourned.